From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. We begin in Guatemala, where the migrant caravan headed towards the United States continues to advance. They are currently headed towards the Guatemala-Mexico border. About 1,000 migrants set off on Saturday, but the group has now grown to over 3,000. Members of the caravan have decried their living conditions in Honduras and spoken out against statements by the region's governments.
In Honduras, we have a corrupt government. Honduras should be sanctioned for condemning these migrants to misery, for keeping them in a country full of violence. The government of Honduras is corrupt. They have murdered people in the streets. It is a criminal government supported by Donald Trump. They have caused this migration. The sanctions are already there. People are already suffering them.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to cut funding for Honduras if he doesn't stop the caravan heading to the United States. Trump warned via Twitter that migrants should not try to enter the country without legal documents. He said the Honduran president should take immediate action to stop them. Mexico has also said it won't allow the migrants to enter unless they comply with immigration requirements. Our correspondent in Guatemala City, Mario Rosales, has more details.
The
caravan of Honduran migrants is currently headed to the east of Guatemala. From there, they plan to arrive to the Mexican border with the final goal of entering the U.S. The caravan continues to move forward despite the threats of President Donald Trump towards the Honduran government. Trump has said that if the caravan is not stopped, all economic aid to Honduras will be cut immediately. Human rights organizations are demanding the government of Guatemala guarantee the rights of migrant children, saying that the life of children should be their main concern. That's all we have for you now.
Venezuela's Minister of Industries and National Production, Tarek El Azaimi, has announced that the US dollar will no longer be used as a reference for transactions in the domestic market. According to El Azaimi, transactions will now be referenced to the euro, yuan, or any other convertible currency. This includes, most importantly, auctions under the foreign exchange system known as DCOM. The minister also announced that the country is set to open bank accounts in Asia and Europe to carry out hard currency transactions.
We're going to begin, and we've already advanced with Asian and European countries, the opening of bank accounts that serve as banking correspondents and intermediaries for the operations that are beginning at this moment.
This announcement comes after the National Development Plan was launched in 6 different parts of the country.
The workers' movement, state governors, and the president took part in a meeting to learn about the National Development Plan. It is based on 15 priority areas for production. As part of the new economic model launched almost 2 months ago, the goal is economic independence.
They are using techniques of economic war to twist the arm of the people, and many of them are also involved in political conspiracies. I count on you to take the action that is necessary.
In a country that has been under economic siege but wants to overcome this, more and more businessmen are joining this new economic era. Among the results, Venezuela's cryptocurrency, the petro.
We want to support this new initiative of the governments to boost supplies and production and to get the goods on the shelves. This is an opportunity to reach the agreements that are needed for this.
The workers say they have to work for the country to overcome this financial blockade imposed from abroad.
We have to be the leading pillar of Venezuela, in spite of everything other countries have done to us. The working class is the priority for this country and for its oil production.
New elements are being added to the recovery and growth plan. which seeks to bring together different sectors of the population to achieve the well-being of all Venezuelans.
Over in Brazil, presidential candidate Fernando Haddad spoke to reporters about possible political alliances. He also touched on some of his plans if he wins the election ahead of the runoff on October 28.
I've reached out to people I respect, independently of their political party. I've not invited anyone yet. I'm gauging options. I am speaking to highly respected people. I want to build the broadest government possible. Brazil needs that, but I've not given out any invites. But I'll keep reaching out to people. In contrast with Bolsonaro, we've decided to keep no one from outgoing President Michel Temer's economic team in our government. On January 1st, Temer's team leaves, and a new team will come in.
And Haddad, a former teacher, returned to his roots when he attended an event held by Brazil's Teachers Union.
On Teachers' Day, Haddad was welcomed by a group of teachers working as a collective of Sao Paulo. Meanwhile, his political rival, Jade Wassenaar, was in Rio de Janeiro meeting members of BOPE, a military squad known for human rights violations.
Bolsonaro has only 2 educational projects, to militarize schools and to outsource them. Haddad, instead, has a national educational program that benefits not only teachers, but students.
When Haddad was the Minister of Education, he enforced programs as a matter of priority, such as University for All, scholarships, and the Open University of Brazil. He expressed his regret over the absence of Bolsonaro in electoral debates, and that as 20 years as a deputy, he only implemented 2 projects.
I apologize for not being able to debate with my opponent. The debate was scheduled. I know why he avoided it. It's because his campaign is completely based on lies sent via WhatsApp. The campaign starts now. Our challenge is to take 9% off of him. With that amount, we will win the election. Analysts say it's hard, and it is in fact a difficult task, but it would be more difficult to withstand a government like the one he proposes.
Haddad has promised to revoke Temer's policies, such as labor and educational adjustment reforms, and freezing social investment for 20 years, decisions that were supported by Bolsonaro.
We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back. Campesino movements in Mexico are continuing their indefinite strike. They demand the government of outgoing President Enrique Peña Nieto fulfill its promises. Protesters are gathered outside the Finance Ministry to demand resources for agricultural production. Campesino leaders have warned they will soon set up road blockades to force a response from the government. Our correspondent in Mexico City, Pablo Perez, brings us more.
Well, since yesterday, Mexican peasants have been on strike outside the offices of the Federal Revenue Secretary. And they are demanding that what the Mexican government, the government of Enrique Peña Nieto, promised to them in terms of economical support for social programs be delivered to them on time. It seems that those resources that were committed to by the government at the beginning of the year have been not delivered, and that has caused several problems on the production cycle of the small agricultural producers. It seems that they're going to be on strike indefinitely until the authorities, the government authorities, receive them and sit on a meeting to decide what is going to be done with their those social programs. And one of the very grave accusations they are making is that money that was supposed to be used for the support of small agricultural producers was detoured towards the presidential campaign of the Revolutionary Institutional Party, the party of Enrique Peña Nieto, who lost on the 1st of July elections.
Still in Mexico, injustice against indigenous people is of great concern to UN rapporteurs who say these conditions must end.
According to the Ombudsman's office, at least 72% of indigenous people in Mexico live below the poverty line.
The percentage of those living in extreme poverty is huge among indigenous people. The National Income and Expense Survey from 2016 points out that nearly 500,000 teenagers are gradually behind in their learning, and an even higher number don't even go to school.
Mexico's representative to the UN talked to us about their concern over the constant aggression and criminalization that indigenous people face while trying to defend their land.
The original people of these lands not only suffer discrimination and lack of access to economic, social and cultural rights, but are also affected by the giveaway of their lands to mega projects without their consent.
During the presentation of her report, the Special UN Reporter for Indigenous People highlighted the grave situation they face due to collusion between organized crime and some authorities.
I received complaints of abuse against indigenous people during military operations by the government against organized crime. There is great concern over deaths caused by excessive force from authorities and also of sexual assault against indigenous women.
Indigenous women also took part in the report's presentation. They condemned the attempts of the government in eradicating the traditions of their communities.
It's really sad that those in power abuse and divide us. We are all Mexican. All of us practice different customs and traditions.
It is estimated that 8.3 million indigenous people live in poverty and another 3.2 million lack access to basic goods.
A group of young Guatemalans are collecting solid waste to draw attention to the contamination of the Atitlan Lake.
These young people from a musical band called Sabor Latino started the day with a mission to clean the dock of the San Pablo area in Sololá.
We have focused more in the artistic area, but we see the situation in which the lake is, the diseases, the bacteria and all the garbage that accumulates in the shore of the lake. We take the initiative to be fully committed to this environmental activity.
The famous and tranquil Atitlan Lake is being polluted, and the youth is witness to its ruin.
I always take this route to go to school. Then every time I pass here, I'm very sad to see that all of this part is full of garbage.
These youngsters say that during their cleaning, they have detected at least 3 types of contamination: black waters, waste from agrochemicals dragged by the rain, and mainly solid waste.
We have found that the waste produced by the large companies, the industries, specifically cans, plastic, and disposable bags, they're the major contaminants of our lake.
The question these young people always ask is if they will be able to fully clean the Atitlan Lake, which has a surface of more than 130 square kilometers.
We are only cleaning the shores of the lake in a symbolic way, so that way we transmit that message.
We are also trying to talk with people from other municipalities so that we can join and do something for the lake, so that we do not lose it in order to someday be really sorry about it.
There are 12 areas in the Sololá province, which are situated on the shores of the Atitlan Lake. The next plan of action for this group of young people will be to demand the municipal council approves a regulation which will stop the use of plastic bags.
Santiago Botón, Telesur, San Pablo, La Laguna, Sololá, Guatemala.
After 5 weeks on strike, unions and social movements in Costa Rica are planning a mass demonstration against the government's tax reform plan. It is said to coincide with a crucial court ruling on the validity of the reform. Our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Haddad, reports.
Today could be a landmark day for the government's proposed tax reform. The country's judiciary is set to make a decision on whether the reforms process up to this point is open to legal objection. If the court decides it is, that would basically block the bill. Because it would mean the bill needs 38 votes to pass, which it does not currently have. So after being passed by the Legislative Assembly in their first debate, the whole process could be struck down and a brand new reform bill would need to be drafted. Trade unions and opposition parties remain expectant over today's decision, which should come in the next few hours.
Jamaica celebrated Heroes' Day on Monday. Prime Minister Andrew Holness paid a special tribute to Sir Alexander Bustamante. Bustamante entered politics by mobilizing Jamaica's working classes against British colonialists. He was imprisoned for 3 years and upon release started the Jamaica Labour Party in 1943. He became Jamaica's first post-independence prime minister in 1962. And Jamaica's anti-sodomite laws are to be reviewed by the InterAmerican Commission on Human Rights. The commission is looking into the case of 2 members of the LGBT community who say they were forced to flee Jamaica in fear of their lives. One of them sought asylum in Canada after allegedly enduring repeated attacks by homophobic gangs. The other one was shot and has since been granted asylum in the Netherlands. Meanwhile, the Human Dignity Trust says Jamaica not only criminalizes consensual sex between men, but also legitimizes violence towards LGBT people. We'll take a short break now. More news in a minute. Welcome back. New reports say the European Commission will allow Britain to remain in the EU customs union and internal market. This beyond an agreed transactional arrangement. Britain was supposed to withdraw at the end of December 2020, but in goodwill gesture, the Commission has reportedly raised the possibility of extending that period. The EU customs union facilitates free trade by greatly reducing financial barriers between member states. And as Brexit talks come to a standstill, a no-deal exit will reportedly be a worst-case scenario. Our correspondent in London, Pablo Navarrete, has more.
Fresh blow to British Prime Minister Theresa May's Brexit strategy. The plans to discuss and publish a draft agreement on the bloc's future trade agreement with the UK have been scrapped after disagreement over the issue of the Irish border. On Sunday, the British Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab refused to sign off on agreement over this issue, and this meant that an announcement by Theresa May in advance of a dinner on Wednesday at a summit of the 27 European Union leaders has been scrapped. And this was a carefully choreographed set of events, and now that's been put into disarray. This is the latest blow for Theresa May and her government when it comes in regards to Brexit strategy. As we know, since June 2016, when the British public voted to leave the European Union, the government has been in turmoil over what exactly position to take, with a very strong and influential sector of its own government, of the Conservatives, in favour of a hard Brexit, and May in favour of a more pragmatic approach to leaving the European Union. So the deadline date is approaching, 30th of March 2019, and the British government's position is being tested and found wanting, really, when it comes to the European Union. There are fears that Britain will ultimately leave the European Union with no deal, which has been called a disaster scenario by many analysts.
Saudi Arabia's Consul General to Turkey has left the country just hours after a search of his residence was announced. This over the disappearance of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. A Turkish investigation team has already searched the Saudi consulate, looking for clues of Khashoggi's whereabouts. The team found some toxic materials that had been painted over and an audio recording that may indicate that the journalist was killed. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan spoke to the press after the consulate had been searched for 9 hours.
Right now, as you are aware, as a result of our intense contacts, this search process is in the consulate has started. Yesterday there was an intense procedure underway until morning, and it will continue. My hope is that we can reach conclusions that will give us a reasonable opinion as soon as possible. Because the investigation is looking into many things, such as toxic materials and those materials being removed by painting them over, this will depend on the conclusion that will come out from there.
United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has met with King Salman and his son, the Crown Prince. They reportedly discussed Khashoggi's disappearance and agreed on a thorough investigation. Khashoggi, who was an outspoken critic of the kingdom, went missing after entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul 2 weeks ago. A documentary based on the case of Indigenous leader Milagros Sala has just premiered in Argentina. Sala has been in detention for over 1,000 days. Her case is believed to be a practice run for an oppressive strategy being used by the government against Argentina's social leaders. We come to the end of this news brief. This and many other stories you can find at our website at telsurtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Jose Daniel Lopez. Thank you for watching.